The great meeting hall was filled with strange creatures from across the galaxy. Some had many arms, others had scales that changed colors, and a few looked like they were made of crystal. They all sat around a huge table that glowed with soft blue light. This was the Galactic Council, where the most powerful races in space made important decisions. Ambassador Kethvar stood up slowly. He was tall and thin, with a body that looked like it was made of clear glass. Light moved through his skin in patterns that showed he was worried. He had traveled far to bring news to the council, and he knew they would not like what he had to say. "Friends," Kethvar began, his voice echoing in the great hall, "I come with urgent news about the humans of planet Earth. They have learned to travel faster than light. We must contact them before they spread into our space." The hall became quiet for a moment. Then, one by one, the council members began to laugh. The sound was strange because each species laughed differently. Some made clicking sounds, others roared, and a few made no sound at all, but their bodies shook. Thorax, the war leader of the hegemony, was the first to speak. He was huge and covered in thick armor-like skin. His people were warriors who had conquered many worlds. "You worry about humans?" he said with a deep, rumbling voice. "They are babies playing with toys. My scouts tell me they still use metal bullets shot from simple guns." More laughter filled the hall. Zarathal, who could speak directly into minds without moving her mouth, sent her thoughts to everyone. "I have looked into human minds from far away. They think about such simple things: food, sleep, and fighting each other over small pieces of land. They are not ready for the galaxy." Kethvar's body flashed with red light, showing his fear. "You do not understand. I have watched them fight their wars. They do not give up. Ever. They have weapons that can destroy their entire planet, and they are willing to use them if they have to." The Vorthan delegate slammed one of his 6 hands on the table. His scales turned bright orange, which meant he was angry. "So what if they have big bombs? We have shields that can stop anything. We have weapons that can melt their cities from space. If they become trouble, we will add their world to our empire." "But they are different," Kethvar tried again. "They do not fight like we do. They learn from every battle. They find new ways to solve problems. I have seen them turn their weaknesses into strengths." The crystalline queen, whose body was made of living diamond, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Dear Kethvar, you give these primitives too much credit. Our technology is thousands of years ahead of theirs. They have not even learned to control their own weather or heal all their diseases." Prime Minister Altara of the peaceful Altarians shook her head sadly. Her people had stopped fighting wars long ago and believed in solving problems with words, not weapons. These humans are clearly too violent for galactic civilization. Perhaps in 1,000 years, when they learn to control their anger, we might consider talking to them. Kethvar felt his hope fading. He had seen something in humans that the others could not understand. He had watched their movies and read their books. He had seen how they never gave up, even when everything seemed lost. He had seen how they could love and hate with equal passion, how they could sacrifice everything for their families and friends. "Please," he said one more time, "do not judge them by their technology alone. Judge them by their spirit. They have something we have forgotten. They have the will to survive no matter what." The laughter grew louder. War Chief Thorax stood up, his armor clanking as he moved. "If these humans want to play with the big races, they will learn what real power looks like. My fleets had destroyed civilizations that were far more advanced than them. And if they resist?" Kethvar asked quietly. "Then we will show them why. The hegemony rules 47 star systems," Thorax replied with a cruel smile. "Their little blue planet will make a nice farming world for my people." The vote was quick. Every member of the council, except Kethfor agreed. They would ignore the humans. No contact would be made. Earth would be left alone until its people proved they were worth noticing. As the meeting ended and the aliens began to leave, Kethfor sent a secret message to his home planet. The message was simple but urgent. Begin preparing our defenses. I fear we have made a terrible mistake today. The humans are coming, whether we want them to or not. The other council members went back to their worlds, laughing about the silly ambassador who was afraid of primitive humans. They had no idea that on Earth, in secret military bases and research centers, humans were already planning for the day they would meet other intelligent life in space. They had no idea that humans had been listening to alien radio signals for years, learning about the galaxy and the powers that controlled it. They had no idea that every human government was working together for the first time in history to prepare for what was coming. They had no idea that the species they had just dismissed as harmless was about to change everything. In the dark space between stars, human ships were already moving, exploring, and preparing. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you ignored a species that had spent millions of years learning to survive against impossible odds. The warning had been given. It had been ignored. Soon, the laughter would stop. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Discovery, staring at the view screen that showed empty space. But he knew it was not really empty. His sensors had detected them 3 days ago. 47 alien ships sitting just outside the solar system, watching and waiting. Any word from them yet, Lisa? Jake asked his communications officer. Lisa Wong shook her head, her fingers dancing over her control panel. Nothing, sir. They ignore every message we send. It's like they don't even know we exist. Jake frowned. The Discovery was Earth's newest exploration ship, sent to make first contact with whoever was out there. The ship carried no weapons, only scientific equipment and a crew of diplomats and scientists. They had come in peace, hoping to make friends with the aliens. Suddenly, Lisa's panel lit up with activity. Sir, I'm getting something. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The message that came through the ship's speakers was cold and simple. The computer translated it into English. Humans of Earth, you will surrender your ships immediately. You will prepare to become part of the hegemony. If you resist, we will destroy your entire species. Jake felt his blood run cold. These aliens had not come to talk. They had come to conquer. Send a reply, he ordered. Tell them we want to discuss terms. The answer came back quickly. There are no terms. Submit or die. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was young but well-trained. Each face showed the same determination he felt. They all knew what this meant. Lisa, send a message to Earth. Tell them to start Protocol 7. Back on Earth, Admiral Roy Patterson received the message in a deep underground bunker. Around him stood representatives from every nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, the entire planet was united against a common threat. This is it, people, Patterson said grimly. Everything we've planned for the last 10 years comes down to this moment. He turned to his aide. Activate the Luna defense grid. Signal Mars base. They are weapons-free. Deploy the asteroid mines. The alien fleet moved slowly toward Earth, confident and careless. War Chief Thorax sat in his command chair, barely, looking at his screens. His ships were massive, each one the size of a small city. His weapons could destroy planets. What could these primitive humans do against such power? Sir, his tactical officer reported, we detect 12 human ships in the area, small vessels, lightly armed. Thorax waved a dismissive hand. Destroy them quickly. Then we move on to their planet. The first attack came without warning. Bright beams of energy shot from the alien ships toward the human vessels. The beams hit their targets, and several human ships exploded in balls of fire. But to Thorax's surprise, some of the ships survived. Their hulls were damaged but still intact. "Impossible," Thorax muttered. "Our weapons should have destroyed them completely." Then the humans did something that shocked every alien in the fleet. They fired back, but the weapons that screamed through space were not energy beams or plasma bolts. They were simple chunks of metal shot from electromagnetic rails at incredible speed. When these metal slugs hit the alien shields, they did not bounce off or fade away. They punched right through. 3 alien ships exploded as the metal projectiles tore through their hulls. Suddenly, alarms began screaming throughout the hegemony fleet as more human ships appeared from behind asteroids and moons, all of them firing. "What is happening?" Thorax demanded. His tactical officer's voice shook with fear. "Sir, their weapons are not energy-based. Our shields are designed to stop plasma and laser fire. These are solid objects moving at nearly the speed of light. Our shields can't stop them." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. The moon revealed massive magnetic launchers that fired bus-sized chunks of metal at the alien fleet. Mars opened up with hidden weapons that had been built into the planet's surface. The asteroid belt itself seemed to come alive as hidden mines exploded around alien ships. Commander Pete Collins, aboard the human ship Defiance, watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. "All ships target their engines. We want some of them alive to tell others what happened here." The alien ships, designed to fight energy-based weapons, were helpless against the human attack. Their shields flickered and failed as solid projectiles slammed into them again and again. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were torn apart by simple metal bullets. Thorax watched in horror as his mighty fleet was destroyed around him. Half his ships were gone, and the rest were badly damaged. "Retreat!" he screamed into his communication system. "All ships, retreat immediately." The surviving alien vessels turned and fled toward the edge of the solar system, their proud formations broken and scattered. As they ran, they left behind the wreckage of 23 ships and thousands of dead warriors. Jake Morrison, still alive aboard the Discovery, watched the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace. "Lisa, send a message to Earth. Tell them the aliens are gone." Admiral Patterson received the message with quiet satisfaction. The plan had worked perfectly. For 10 years, ever since they had first detected alien signals, Earth had been preparing for this day. They had built weapons in secret, hidden them throughout the solar system, and trained their crews for the battle they knew would come. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're detecting more alien signals." "Different ships, different locations," Patterson nodded. He had expected this. The galaxy was full of threats, and one victory would not be enough. "Send the word to all defense stations. This is just the beginning." On his damaged flagship, War Chief Thorax sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. "The humans," he gasped, blood flowing from his wounds. "They fight like nothing we have ever seen. They turned their entire star system into a trap. Their weapons ignore our shields. They are not primitives. They are monsters." But the Council, safe in their distant meeting halls, did not believe him. They thought he was making excuses for his failure. They did not understand that humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the only language that truly mattered, the language of strength. That the warning had been ignored. The laughter had stopped. And across the galaxy, other alien races began to take notice of the small blue planet that had just destroyed one of the most powerful fleets in known space. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe was about to learn what that really meant. News of the hegemony's defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In meeting halls and command centers on 100 different worlds, alien leaders struggled to understand what had happened. The mighty war fleet of Thorax, which had conquered 17 star systems, had been crushed by a species that most had never heard of. Fleet. Admiral Zarathul of the Nexaray Empire read the battle reports with growing anger. Her people were mind readers, able to control thoughts and emotions from great distances. They had built their empire by breaking the will of their enemies before the fighting even began. "This cannot be true," she said to her advisors, her mental voice sharp with rage. 47 warships defeated by primitives? Thorax must be lying to cover his shame. Her chief strategist, a pale creature with large eyes that never blinked, projected his thoughts carefully. "Admiral, our spies confirmed the reports. The human weapons somehow bypassed hegemony shields. Perhaps we should approach this more carefully." Zarathul's anger flared brighter. "Carefully? We are the Nexari. We have conquered minds across 50 star systems. These humans will kneel before our mental power, or they will go insane from the pain we send into their thoughts." She assembled a fleet of 200 ships, the largest force the Nexari had ever sent against a single world. Each ship carried dozens of powerful telepaths, trained to break minds and crush spirits. As they traveled toward Earth, Zarathul was already planning how she would use the humans as examples to frighten other potential rebels. On Earth, Admiral Patterson received reports of the approaching fleet with grim determination. "How long until they arrive?" he asked his intelligence officer. "6 days, sir." "And Admiral, these are different from the last ones. Our deep space monitors are picking up some kind of mental energy from their ships. The eggheads think they might be telepaths." Patterson nodded slowly. During the 10 years of preparation, Earth scientists had theorized about aliens with mental powers. They had even prepared countermeasures, though they had never been tested in real combat. "Activate the Psi-Shield project," Patterson ordered, "and get me Dr. Sarah Kim in the Psych Warfare Division." Dr. Kim arrived within an hour, carrying a briefcase full of experimental devices. She was a small woman with tired eyes, who had spent years studying how the human mind worked under stress. "Admiral, the Psi-Shield devices are ready, but we've only had time to make enough for key personnel. Most of our people will have to rely on natural mental defenses." "What about the other plan?" Patterson asked quietly. Dr. Kim smiled for the first time in weeks. "The Chaos Protocol? It's ready, sir. Though I have to warn you, it's going to be very unpleasant for our own people, too." The Nexaray fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly on schedule. Zarathul looked at the tactical displays, showing human ships spread throughout the system. There were more of them now, perhaps 50 vessels, but still tiny compared to her mighty fleet. "Begin the mental assault," she commanded. "Break their minds first, then we destroy their ships." The attack began with a wave of pure terror projected by 200 alien minds working together. The psychic assault was designed to paralyze human crews with overwhelming fear, making them helpless to fight back. For 30 seconds, it worked perfectly. Human ships drifted helplessly as their crews writhed in panic. Then something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Commander Pete Collins, aboard the ship Defiance, felt the alien thoughts trying to invade his mind. The fear was terrible, but instead of fighting it, he did something the Nexari had never encountered. He started thinking about his most embarrassing memories. The time he had fallen down in front of his entire high school class. The time he had thrown up on his date at the prom. The time he had called his teacher Mom in front of everyone. The psychic backlash was immediate. 3 Nexari telepaths collapsed unconscious as Collins' embarrassing memories flooded into their minds. Across the human fleet, crews began following the same protocol. Captain Susan Clark thought about her mother-in-law's terrible cooking. Engineer Bill Murphy thought About the time he had gotten food poisoning and spent 3 days in the bathroom. Communications officer Amy Foster thought about every awkward conversation she had ever had on a first date. The Nexari telepaths, expecting to find minds full of military secrets or battle plans, instead found themselves drowning in a flood of human embarrassment, awkwardness, and social anxiety. The psychic network that connected their ships began to break down as telepaths fainted, vomited, or simply curled up in corners, trying to escape the mental chaos. What is happening? Zarathul screamed, blood flowing from her sensitive mental. Organs. Her tactical officer, barely conscious, managed to gasp out an answer. They're weaponizing their own uncomfortable memories, Admiral. It's like they're mentally screaming at us with pure embarrassment and social awkwardness. The space battle that followed was even more one-sided than the fight with the hegemony. The Nexari ships, their crews incapacitated by the mental chaos, could barely coordinate their attacks. Meanwhile, the humans had learned from their first victory. Their weapons were more accurate, their tactics more refined. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a squadron of ships, watched the alien fleet fall apart. All units target their communication arrays. Let's make sure they can't coordinate any kind of response. A battle lasted only 4 hours. When it ended, the Nexari fleet was scattered and broken. Zarathul's flagship limped away with barely a third of her ships still functional. As they fled into hyperspace, she sent a desperate message to her home world. The humans, she whispered, her mind still reeling from the psychic assault. They turned their own thoughts into weapons. They made their embarrassment into a shield. How do you fight an enemy that uses awkwardness as armor? But the defeats of 2 major powers only encouraged others to test humanity's strength. The crystalline hive, confident in their numbers, assembled 10,000 ships for what they called the final swarm. They would overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers, drowning Earth's defenses in an endless tide of vessels. They discovered that humanity had not been idle during the months between battles. The asteroid belt was now a massive shipyard, producing new vessels at an incredible rate. Mars had become a fortress world, its surface covered with weapons that could reach across the solar system. And Earth itself was surrounded by a network of defense platforms that made the earlier battles look like training exercises. The Hive lost 7,000 ships before their queen ordered a retreat. The Quantum Collective tried to use their mastery of space and time to simply erase the human solar system from existence. Their reality-warping weapons failed mysteriously, as human computer viruses infected their quantum processors, turning their own technology against them. The machine empire, proud of their artificial intelligence, sent an automated fleet to absorb human technology. They found their ship computers hacked within hours by programs the humans called viruses, malicious code that turned the machines against their creators. With each victory, humanity's reputation grew. The galaxy began to whisper about the impossible species that could turn any weakness into strength, any disadvantage into victory. Some called them devils, others called them miracles, but everyone called them dangerous. On Earth, Admiral Patterson stood in his command center, looking at reports from across the galaxy. More alien fleets were being assembled, more threats were growing, but he was no longer worried. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, and that place was as the species that nobody wanted to fight. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're getting communication requests from 17 different alien governments. They all want to discuss peace treaties." Patterson smiled grimly. "Tell them we'll be happy to talk. But make sure they understand, we negotiate from a position of strength now." The warnings had been ignored. The laughter had stopped. And across the galaxy, a new truth was being learned by every species that had ever looked toward the small blue planet with contempt. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were the monsters that other monsters feared. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the third time in 1 year. The great hall that had once echoed with laughter about primitive humans now buzzed with worried whispers and fearful glances. 7 major powers had challenged humanity, and 7 had been defeated. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and the established order was beginning to crumble. Ambassador Kethfer stood before the diminished assembly. Many seats were empty now, their occupants either defeated by humans or too frightened to attend council meetings. His crystalline body flickered with patterns of light that showed both sadness and grim satisfaction. "I tried to warn you," he said quietly. "1 year ago, I stood in the same place and told you that humanity was dangerous. You laughed. You called them primitives. You planned to conquer them when it was convenient." Prime Minister Altara of the Altarians, her usually calm demeanor cracked with stress, leaned forward. "Ambassador Kethfer, we understand that our initial assessment was ... incorrect. But surely there must be some way to contain this threat?" "Threat?" Kethfer's body flashed with sharp blue light, indicating surprise. "You still think of them as a threat? They have defeated every species that attacked them. Yes. But have they invaded anyone? Have they conquered any worlds? Have they enslaved any populations?" The council members looked at each other uncomfortably. It was true. Despite their military victories, the humans had not expanded beyond their own solar system. They had not retaliated against the home worlds of their attackers. They had simply defended themselves and then ... waited. War Chief Thorax, still bearing scars from his defeat at Earth, spoke with a voice that had lost its former arrogance. "What do they want?" "Every species in the galaxy seeks to expand, to grow, to build empires. But these humans just sit in their little corner of space, building more weapons." The answer came from an unexpected source. The great doors of the council hall opened, and a small figure walked in. She was clearly human, bipedal, soft-skinned, with the strange hair that covered only the top of her head. She wore simple clothes and carried no weapons, but every being in the hall tensed as she approached. "Ambassador Susan Clark, representing the Terran Federation," she announced herself calmly. "I believe you've been talking about us." The hall fell completely silent. This was the first time a human had set foot in the Galactic Council chambers. Prime Minister Altara, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol, gestured to an empty chair. "Please, Ambassador Clark, we would like to hear what humanity has to say." Susan sat down and looked around the room with curious eyes. "Thank you. I know this hasn't been easy for any of you. Earth would like to propose something new, a different way for all of us to live together in this galaxy." The Vorthan delegate, his scales pale with fear, managed to speak. "What do you want from us?" Susan smiled, and somehow that simple expression made several council members flinch. They had learned to fear humanity's unpredictability. "We want to stop fighting. We want to start working together. We want to build something better than what existed before." She stood up and activated a holographic projector, filling the air above the table with images and data. "This is what we propose, the Galactic Cooperation Accord. Free trade between all species, mutual defense agreements, shared scientific research, exploration of new worlds together instead of fighting over old ones." The presentation was impressive, showing star charts with proposed trade routes, research stations that could be built together, and joint military forces that could protect smaller species from pirates and raiders. But the council members were more focused on one thing. "What's the catch?" asked the crystalline queen, her diamond body reflecting light nervously. Susan's smile became less warm, though her voice remained friendly. "Simple. No member of the Accord may attack, threaten, or attempt to subjugate another member. Anyone who breaks this rule will face the combined response of all other members. And if someone violates this accord? Prime Minister Altara asked quietly. Then they'll discover why some species have started calling us the Guardians of the Galaxy, Susan replied. We've learned that some of you respond better to strength than to kindness. We're prepared to provide either, depending on the situation. A vote was scheduled for the next day, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Council had learned through painful experience that humanity kept its promises, both the good ones and the bad ones. As the session ended, Ambassador Kethvar approached. Susan in the corridor outside the hall. Ambassador Clark, may I ask you something? Of course. Your species has won every battle it has fought. You could conquer the galaxy if you wanted to. Why don't you? Susan paused and looked out through a window at the stars beyond. Because conquering is easy, Ambassador. Any species with big enough guns can do it. Building something that lasts. Something that makes everyone's lives better. That's the hard part. That's the part worth doing. The next day, the Galactic Cooperation Accord was signed by every remaining member of the Council. Within months, human ships were patrolling space lanes, protecting merchant vessels from pirates. Human scientists were working with alien researchers to cure diseases and solve hunger. Human engineers were helping to build stations in dangerous regions of space that no single species could manage alone. But perhaps the most important change was the establishment of the Galactic Defense Force. Ships from dozens of worlds, commanded by officers from many species, all working together to protect those who could not protect themselves. The GDF's motto was simple and direct. Never again. Never again would a small world be conquered by a larger one. Never again would a weak species be enslaved by a strong one. Never again would might make right in their galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the GDF flagship Harmony, stood on his bridge watching his human and alien crews worked side by side. His communications officer was a Zephyrian, his engineer was Altarian, and his tactical officer was actually a reformed hegemony warrior who had requested to join after seeing what cooperation could accomplish. Sir, his Zephyrian officer reported, we're receiving a distress call from the Kalar system. Pirate raids on the outer colonies. Set course for Kalar, Jake ordered. Signal the Nexari cruiser Golden Thought and the Vorthan destroyer Swift Scale. Tell them we have work to do. As the mixed fleet jumped to hyperspace, Jake reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, these species had been trying to destroy each other. Now they fought side by side to protect innocent civilians. Back on Earth, President Karen Mitchell addressed the world in her weekly broadcast. Fellow humans, she said, 1 year ago, we stood alone in a hostile galaxy. Today, we stand with allies from 43 different worlds. We have learned that our greatest strength was never our weapons or our tactics. It was our ability to turn enemies into friends. The broadcast was transmitted across the galaxy, translated into hundreds of languages. On distant worlds, children of many species learned about the humans who had changed everything, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple idea that working together was better than fighting alone. Ambassador Kethvar, now serving as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Cooperation Accord, often returned to his home world to visit the memorial they had built. It honored all those who had died in the conflicts before humanity arrived, conflicts that seemed pointless now that peace was possible. The inscription on the memorial was written in every known language. They were warned about humanity. They laughed. They learned. They lived. The galaxy had been warned. The warning had been ignored. But in the end, it was not the galaxy that had burned. It was the old ways, the old hatreds, the old belief that some species were better than others. In its place, something new had grown, something that worked, something worth defending, something human. 20 years had passed since the first human ship had met aliens in the dark of space. The galaxy was a very different place now, and those who remembered the old days sometimes struggled to believe how much had changed. Ambassador Susan Clark, now showing gray in her hair but still sharp in her mind, walked through the corridors of Unity Station. The massive space station orbited a neutral star, serving as the headquarters for the Galactic Cooperation Accord. Beings from dozens of worlds worked together here, solving problems that no single species could handle alone. She stopped at an observation deck and looked out at the ships docked nearby. A sleek Zephyrian science vessel worked alongside a massive hegemony construction ship to build a new research laboratory. Nexari telepaths were helping human psychologists understand how to heal minds damaged by war. Former enemies now shared meals in the station's common areas, their children playing together in the educational centers. Amazing, isn't it? A familiar voice said behind her dot. Susan turned to see Admiral Jake Morrison approaching. He commanded the Galactic Defense Force now, and his uniform bore decorations from a dozen different worlds. But his eyes still held the same determination they had shown during that first battle so many years ago. Sometimes I have to remind myself it's real, Susan admitted. Do you remember when we thought the best we could hope for was to survive first contact? Jake laughed. I remember thinking we'd be lucky if we could convince them not to turn Earth into a parking lot. He joined her at the window, watching as a group of young beings from different species worked together to repair a damaged freighter. Now look at them. They don't even think about which world they came from anymore. The success of the Accord had exceeded everyone's expectations. Trade flowed freely between worlds, making everyone richer. Scientific cooperation had led to breakthroughs in medicine, energy, and space travel that benefited all species. Most importantly, the combined fleets of the Defense Force had made piracy and slavery almost extinct in their part of the galaxy. But the real change went deeper than politics or economics. An entire generation was growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal, where differences between species were seen as strengths rather than threats. Young beings learned multiple languages as a matter of course, studied the histories and cultures of other worlds, and planned careers that would take them far from their birth planets. The communication system chimed, and Susan's aide approached. Ambassador, you have a visitor. Ambassador Kethfor is here for your appointment. Kethfor entered the observation lounge, his crystalline body showing the wear of age, but still glowing with inner light. As the first non-human to learn about humanity's potential, he had become something of a legend in diplomatic circles. His predictions had been ignored initially, but history had proven him right in ways no one had expected. Susan Jake, he greeted them warmly. I wanted to speak with you before the memorial ceremony tomorrow. Tomorrow marked the 20th anniversary of First Contact, and representatives from across the galaxy would gather to remember those who had died in the conflicts that followed. But it would also celebrate the peace that had grown from those dark days. The memorial is important, Kethvar continued, but I think there's something else we should discuss. We've built something remarkable here, but we shouldn't become comfortable. The galaxy is vast, and there are still regions where the old ways persist. He was right, Susan knew. The Accord now included over 100 worlds, but that was still only a small part of the galaxy. Beyond their borders, there were still empires built on conquest, species that enslaved others, pirates who raided defenseless colonies. The Outer Rim territories are still a problem, Jake agreed. My ships patrol there regularly, but we can't be everywhere at once. And we're starting to receive refugees from conflicts beyond our space. Which brings me to my proposal, Kethvar said. It's time to expand our mission. Not through conquest, but through example. We should start accepting colonies of refugees, helping them build new lives within Accord space. And we should offer membership to any species that genuinely wants to change. Susan nodded slowly. It was ambitious, but the Accord had grown from ambitious ideas before. It won't be easy. Some of our current members might resist taking in former enemies. Some will, Kethfer agreed, but many won't. That's what humanity taught us, that former enemies can become the strongest allies. The hegemony warriors who now serve in the Defense Force are among our most dedicated peacekeepers. It was true. Many of the species that had initially attacked humanity had become the most committed supporters of the Accord, perhaps because they had seen both sides, the cost of endless war and the benefits of cooperation. The next day, beings from across the galaxy gathered in Unity Station's Great Hall for the memorial ceremony. President Karen Mitchell, now serving her second term as Earth's leader, spoke to the assembly via holographic projection. 20 years ago, we met for the first time, she said, her words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. That meeting began with threats and violence. Today, our children play together, our scientists work together, and our defenders stand united against those who would harm the innocent. She paused, looking directly at the camera that would carry her words to every world in the Accord. We remember those who died in the early conflicts, not with anger, but with determination. Their sacrifice taught us that there is a better way to live among the stars. The ceremony continued with speakers from many worlds, each sharing their perspective on how the galaxy had changed. War Chief Thorax, now a respected member of the Defense Force, spoke about learning that true strength came from protecting others, not conquering them. Admiral Zarathul described how telepathic cooperation had replaced mental domination in Nexari culture, but perhaps the most moving speech came from a young being named Kira, whose parents were from different species entirely. She had grown up on Unity Station, speaking 4 languages fluently and considering the entire galaxy her home. To the older generation, she said, "You remember a time when our species fought each other. But my generation knows only cooperation. We don't see aliens when we look at each other. We see friends, colleagues, and family. This is your gift to us, and we promise to protect it." After the ceremony, Susan found herself in her office, reviewing reports from across Accord space. The news was mostly good. New trade agreements were bringing prosperity to previously poor worlds. Joint research projects were solving problems that had plagued individual species for centuries. The Defense Force was successfully protecting shipping lanes and responding to emergency calls from across their territory. But there were challenges too. Refugee ships were arriving weekly from beyond Accord borders, fleeing wars and disasters. Some carried survivors of species that had never encountered modern technology. Others brought news of conflicts in distant regions, where entire civilizations were being destroyed. Her aide knocked and entered. "Ambassador, there's a communication from the frontier. Captain Morrison says it's urgent." The holographic image of Jake appeared above her desk, but he was clearly on the bridge of his ship, and alarm lights were flashing behind him. "Susan, we've got a situation developing in the Kepler sector. Long-range scouts are reporting a massive fleet heading this way. Size unknown, origin unknown, but they're not responding to any communications." Susan felt a chill. How long until they reach Accord space? At their current speed, maybe 6 weeks. But Susan, that's not the worst part. Our deep space sensors are picking up something else. They're not just moving toward us. They're destroying everything in their path. Entire star systems are going dark behind them. The implications hit Susan immediately. This wasn't another challenge from a known species seeking to test humanity's strength. This was something completely new, and it was coming for all of them. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Accord Council," she said. "How many ships can you assemble?" Every available vessel is already moving to defensive positions, Jake replied. But Susan, if these newcomers have been destroying star systems, our normal tactics might not be enough. After the communication ended, Susan stood at her window again, looking out at the peaceful ships docked around Unity Station. In 6 weeks, this might all be gone. The 20 years of peace and cooperation might end in fire and destruction. As she watched, she saw something that gave her hope. Ships from dozens of worlds were already beginning to move, forming up in defensive formations. Not because they had been ordered to, but because they chose to stand together. Human vessels flew alongside former enemies, all united in defense of what they had built. The galaxy had been warned about humanity once before. The warnings had been ignored, and the result had been defeat for those who underestimated human determination. That now humanity and their allies faced a new threat together. And this time, they would not be caught unprepared. This time, they would not fight alone. The warning had been given. The laughter had stopped. The galaxy had learned dot, and now, as new darkness approached from the void between stars, that hard-won wisdom would be put to its greatest test. But whatever came from the deep, space beyond, it would find not a collection of scattered, competing species, but a united galaxy that had law